Watch this.
I honestly thought the NCAA had stopped allowing trans athletes onto female teams because of the fairness and the safety. I thought it had stopped after the swimmer incident with Riley Gaines.
Well, it hasn't stopped, and that didn't stop Boise State from forfeiting their volleyball match against San Jose State over the weekend. Something one Middleton mom thinks should happen more often. You know, there are more highlights on the Blues Saturday than just the points put up by the Broncos against the Cougars. Actually, more of a lowlight, though, for one of Idaho's top leaders. You wouldn't know by looking at it, but the historic Martin House is one of Gem County's gems because of who lived there. Back in 2020, when Idaho became the first state to ban transgender girls and women from playing on teams for which they identify, there was a question of whether that was even a thing here in Idaho. Well, it was, as evidenced by the subsequent lawsuit filed that April by a transgender woman who wanted to run on the Boise State cross-country team. There's currently an injunction against the Fairness in Women's Sports Act from being enforced while the lawsuit plays out here in Idaho. But that doesn't mean the law hasn't cast its shadow. There was the double down by Idaho's governor last month when he signed an executive order to combat the Biden administration's interpretation of Title IX, which includes protections for transgender athletes. He did it right there on the State House steps, standing right beside Riley Gaines. And then last week, when Boise State forfeited its women's volleyball game against San Jose State University, allegedly because the Spartans have a transgender woman on their team. Allegedly, since BSU didn't explain why it was forfeiting the match. They only went on to say that, well, just that they will not play the game against San Jose State in California on Saturday. And per Mountain West Conference policy, that match will be recorded as a conference loss for the Broncos. No other comment or explanation was offered. It was about that time, on Friday, we learned there was some history of forfeiture and a lot more to this story. According to Outkick, a website created by the Heritage Foundation, in 2022, San Jose State enrolled a transfer player from Coastal Carolina. Blair Fleming, a 6'1" outside hitter, came to the Bay Area school from South Carolina shortly after the Palmetto State passed its own trans athlete ban. In March of 2024, Riley Gaines, mentioned before, the collegiate swimmer who lost their race to a transgender athlete, joined 15 other athletes in a lawsuit against the NCAA for allowing transgender women to compete against cisgender women. Well, that lawsuit has been supported by the Independent Council on Women's Sports, or ICONS as they call themselves. Anyway, about a month later, Redux, an online publication that prides itself on reporting about pedophiles of all things, outed Blair Fleming as transgender. The day that story dropped, on April 17th, Blair told her teammate and sometimes travel roommate, Brooke Slusser, she did in fact identify as a transgender woman. Of course, this is according to Brooke Slusser's amendment to that lawsuit, the ICONS lawsuit and the Riley Gaines lawsuit, which she filed on September 23rd. That was about a week ago, saying she never knew and should have been told Fleming was transgender. But about a week before that, Southern Utah University forfeited its match against San Jose State without saying why. Then on September 24th, ICONS sent a letter to all Mountain West Conference schools presidents saying they're violating federal law and they should find Fleming ineligible to play. 3 days later, Boise State backs out of its match against San Jose State. And of course, you've seen all of the social media coverage, both good and bad, that Boise State has received, even a shout out from the governor saying they are protecting women's sports. Well, in the middle of all that, there's a Middleton mom who got herself involved. April Cheney has a daughter who plays volleyball at another Mountain West Conference school. And on September 22nd, the day before the ICONS letter was sent to conference schools, April penned a letter to the same school presidents because, as she told us today, she wanted to defend her daughter's place in the game. And we had several questions, but the answer to our first kind of gives you an idea of where April is coming from. We asked her if a transgender woman, who is a woman, wants to play sports with other women, isn't the only option for her to play on the women's team?
A transgender athlete who is biologically male is not a woman, and that's just words. They're not a woman because they don't have a uterus and they don't get a period. It's basic biology. They're not a woman. They're not.
And what are your concerns?
The concerns are safety, number one, especially in volleyball, because the net difference is different in men's volleyball versus women's volleyball. There is a difference in height, and the reason why, because men are biologically made bigger, stronger, and faster. So that ball's coming over the net stronger, faster.
Fleming.
So Blair is 6'1".
Yes.
There are other women on the team that are that tall. So is there much of an advantage there?
Yes, because a biological male can jump higher and can hit harder.
Blair has played on San Jose State's team. This will be her third year. The first 2 years, there didn't seem to be a concern or a problem, correct?
Fleming had not come out as stating that he was a male. It was unknown. There was no transparency.
If there was no problem and nobody raised any concerns, but then she comes out as transgender, can you see how that might seem a little transphobic?
I wasn't involved then. I'm involved now, so I'm speaking on today. Today I am involved, and I know. So I have to speak on what I know right now.
And you wrote a letter.
Yes, I did.
Her letter, dated September 22nd, April said she sent to all university presidents in the Mountain West Conference. And in it, she emphasized safety and fairness. She also asked schools to boycott matches against the Spartans.
And I heard nothing back.
Do you know anybody else who has written letters like this? Parents that have wanted to, or have written letters?
I get a lot of support for what I'm doing because this is really out of my wheelhouse, speaking up like this. It's very unusual. So they all support me and they're cheering for me, but they're afraid. They are afraid to speak out.
How do you know this?
They've told me.
What have they said?
Well, they're afraid that they're going to be viewed as transphobic or hateful. They're afraid of losing their jobs for speaking up. They're afraid of their female student athlete losing their spot. So I get it, and I respect the place that they're at right now, but we need more people speaking up. We need players, we need fans, and we need parents.
What do you want to see happen?
I would like to see the NCAA separate collegiate sports by biological sex and protect the female category.
No gray area.
There's no gray area. We are born either a male or a female. And I'm not too sure how we got to this gray area in sports, because sports have always been separated by sex. There's always been separation in sports to make it fair.
There was a time when sports were separated by race and color too.
Mm-hmm. That is true. But again, I'm going back to the most basic separation, biological sex. It shouldn't be complicated.
You mentioned risk. Other parents don't want to risk.
Mm-hmm.
You've risked a little bit.
I've risked a lot, yeah.
How so?
My daughter has asked me not to speak about this. She asked me twice and begged me a third time. She doesn't want this drama on her team. She doesn't want to deal with this, and she never asked for this attention, and I never wanted that for her, but as of right now, she's really upset with me.
How upset? Not
talking to me. And I told her when she asked me each time, I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. This issue is bigger than you. It's bigger than your team. It's bigger than your conference. It's women's sports on the line here. And I'm just hoping that the foundation we have built, that she'll see this and understand why.
April says the risk of not speaking to her daughter again over this issue is worth it. Says she's hoping she's not the only one speaking up, though, about this issue. She told us this isn't something players or coaches should have to deal with. It should have already been handled higher up, she says, thus her letter to the school presidents. Other than to say members will continue to promote Title IX and ensure fair competition, the NCAA has not responded to our request for comment. The Mountain West, well, they just deferred to what Boise State put out on Friday, which we saw wasn't much. which is probably the biggest problem in all of this. Nobody's really saying anything about it. Nobody's coming to the table to talk about it and put these issues forth and come up with a solution. And what is that solution? For teams to just continue to forfeit? Boise State, by the way, is now 0-2 in conference with a game against Air Force coming up this week. So what happens when San Jose State plays Colorado State on Thursday night? Do the Rams forfeit, or do they play on and then boost their conference standings? Or possibly lose their conference standing? And what happens when San Jose State comes into Boise, which they're scheduled to do on November 21st?
We'll see if I can't embarrass myself somewhere along the way in the game, but I'll be down on the blue at some point during the game, and so it should be a really fun weekend.
All right, let's switch to a little bit lighter side of Boise State sports on this Monday. Were you one of the record-setting 37,000 plus filling Albertson Stadium on Saturday? Well, last week, Secretary of State Phil McGrane told us he would be there. He'd be one of those, but he was kind of vague on what he would be doing. Well, Secretary McGrane, 37,000 people now know. And yes, it was to encourage voter registration, but also yeah, during the first half of the game, Phil raced, blitzed the Boise State T-Dog to see who could get the T first, obviously, and bring it back. But Phil McGrane took a fall and wasn't able to recover. Blitz, of course, did what he did and took the T all the way back to the end zone first. But missed it that first time back. Good news, nobody was hurt other than, of course, Secretary of State Phil McGrane, other than his ego. He did say it was fun, though, and nobody enjoyed it more than his kids from the sidelines. All right, speaking of falls, hopefully none of you took a tumble. If you were a little wobbly while wobbling on a Lime scooter this weekend, you wouldn't be the only one, because two-wheelers were one of 2 records broken on game day. Morgan Romero tells us more about that, the new record, and more in today's 411.
There's one more no vote for Proposition 1. On Friday, Governor Brad Little said in his newsletter, quote, "I'm opposed to ranked choice voting," and signed House Bill 179 in 2023 banning it in Idaho. We must promote voting practices that are clear, increase voter participation, and don't undermine confidence in our elections. The governor goes on to say voters will decide on Proposition 1 in November, but he will not be supporting it. The iconic Boise Depot is turning 100 years old next year, and the city of Boise is asking for your help celebrating. They're looking for pictures, artifacts, and stories from its construction to early neighborhood life and beyond. You can see examples on your screen. Find the donation form on the City of Boise's website. The Depot's centennial celebration will be next April 12th through the 16th. 2 records were broken Saturday. Boise State had its largest attendance ever on the Blue. 37,711 people witnessed the Broncos' 45-24 win over Washington State. Lime Scooter broke the other record with over 9,000 trips on game day. That's over 2,000 more rides than their previous record the Saturday before. Keep scooting on. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Morgan Romero.
Did you know Emmett wasn't always called Emmett? It was actually named Martinsville, and all these years later, the namesake is still standing. We're looking for other gems of Gem County or of the Gem State. Or maybe you have some questions about the show. Of course, you probably have some comments, too. Text them to us, 208-321-5614. As always, include your name and the hashtag #the208. Clean, concise, and clever, and maybe a little controversial. We might share yours at the end of the show. Head 30 miles northwest of Boise. Take Highway 16, you'll find what's called the Gem of the Payette. Gem County's 48 miles long, 22 miles wide, and the town of Emmett holds the county seat. So if you're just driving through town, though, you likely wouldn't find what some call their gem of the county. Hunter Funk reports.
If you drive through downtown Emmett, you can see the history in the storefronts. But leave Main Street, head north of town, near the Payette River, and drive past this home. Well, you might just feel spooked. It's fitting, given its Gothic Revival architecture, but it's also clear there's history in this home, safely tucked behind a security fence at the end of Wardwell Avenue. Standing there since 1879, it's gone practically unnoticed. But this home's history, and the man who lived in it, are the foundation of the city of Emmett.
In early 1862-63, when gold and silver discoveries are making this area, this region, attractive to Euro-Americans, to American settlers, there are a couple early settlers who arrive in the Payette River Valley there in the area that we think of now as Emmett, and one of them is Nathaniel Martin.
Before being known as the city of Emmett, it was actually named Martinsville.
It literally gives his name to the towns.
Nathaniel Martin started a ferry crossing the Payette River and was considered a founder of the town. In 1868, Martin established a post office named Emmetsville, which was later shortened to Emmett and became the name of the town soon after. In the late 1870s, he took over more than 48 acres, and a man known as Clint Brown built his home, which still stands today.
According to the Gem County Historical Society, the house was actually built by the local undertaker and coffin maker.
Martin shared the home with his son and his family and continued running the ferry west of where the present bridge on the river stands. He died in 1884, and the house was passed down through the family. It is the oldest house in Gem County. The Stoic House is a reminder of the community's beginning, but you wouldn't be able to tell that now. Gem County Historic Preservation Commission is actively working to protect and preserve the history.
They finished their most recent historic preservation plan for the county in 2022, so they have sort of a game plan for how they're going to proactively move the needle on historic places.
Until then, the two-story home remains a silent witness to Emmett's roots. Now, we did not hear back from Gem County Historical Society to see what their plan is for this home, so right now it's just sitting behind that protected fence.
So I was going to ask you, so 2022 they put that plan together, is what Dan said?
Yes.
Okay, but we don't know what that plan is.
Correct. You know, and I'd also seen from the Historical Society they had like Save the Martin House.
Okay.
But I was also hearing that there wasn't a lot of traction, so they're just kind of in this sitting place where it's like, what do we do with it? We're not restoring it, and we're also not tearing it down. So they're just trying to figure it out, especially as that new highway's coming in over there, or interstate.
Yeah, that kind of
causing more growth.
Right, and so I guess they probably want more than just a sign that says what used to be here was.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Such a fun time of year to see the leaves changing color, the days getting cooler. I know over the weekend we were hard pressed to believe that we were in the fall season and with those temperatures in the 90s on Saturday. But today, no doubt, right? It's been a very brisk send off to September. We still have winds out of the northwest at 13 miles per hour. You can see the trees shaking in the foreground here, maybe shivering a little as that is a very brisk wind. Still 67 degrees with sunshine. That's bearable, though much cooler than we were even yesterday. Temperatures are in the 70s out towards Ontario right now. That is by far the warmest spot across our viewing area. We're in the low 60s with sunshine and some windy conditions in the Magic Valley, upper 60s to even just upper 50s in our mountains. So what you want to pay attention to for tomorrow, while we will have warmer overall temperatures during the day, we have the possibility of some patchy frost early in the morning tomorrow. Before sunrise, we could see those temperatures dip into the mid to upper 30s across the Treasure and Magic Valleys. This would be the first frost of the season for many spots. I don't know that we'll see temperatures in the 30s in Boise, but you get to those colder spots across the Treasure Valley. That is certainly a possibility. So maybe prepare now if you have those sensitive plants in the garden that you like to protect. Put a light layer over them before you go to bed tonight to protect from the possibility of that frost. The good news is we only warm up from here. Here's your 7-day outlook for Boise. Nothing but sunshine all week long, and temperatures hit the mid 70s tomorrow. That's where they stay through Thursday. How do 80s sound on Friday and Saturday? Picture perfect as we head into the first few days of October.
We got a lot of comments today on the Middleton mom who wrote a letter to the Mountain West Conference presidents of their schools asking them to forfeit the games against San Jose State because they have a transgender player. Well, couldn't get to them all, but we'll get to a few of them right now. This one from Larry in Boise. Why didn't BSU forfeit last year? Is it because no one could tell San Jose State had a transgender player? If it made no difference last year, should anyone care this year? Asks Larry. Meanwhile, Kevin in Boise, many parents won't speak up for fairness and safety in women's sports until their daughter gets bumped from the podium or loses a scholarship. I assume Kevin is saying that glad this mom stepped up before that happened. Who plays what sport? It's easy. If you have a Y chromosome, you play with the men. Period. Speaking of period, Allison in Boise says, I guess I'm not a woman, given that I no longer have a uterus or a period. Not a defense. Try again. Yeah, people with hysterectomy, women with hysterectomies don't have those things. So should not be the definition of what constitutes a woman. That woman must not understand that transgender women take hormones that reduce their muscle mass. They are indeed women, says Linda. Brian, it's as simple as an XY chromosomes. It's biology. Just because someone identifies as a female doesn't make them female. Men don't belong in female sports. You continue to push your liberal values. Why did you move to Idaho in the first place? Asked Sue. For a job. This one. The volleyball mom clearly needs a lesson in biology. She's doing her daughter no favors either. I would love to hear from the players, says Jack in Boise. We would too. We would love to hear from the players, the ones that affected by these issues most closely. We've tried. But we can't get them to talk to us. Can't get permission from the schools or their coaches, and we don't get our phone calls or emails answered. But yes, that is a spot we wanted to hear from, just like we wanted to hear from the parents. The parents of a girl that's on this team, they have concerns. They want to express those concerns. They're worried about safety and fairness. And that's the perspective we wanted to offer today, because we haven't heard that side either. And hopefully today you got that. And hopefully today you can consider it. And all the other stuff that we try to bring you every day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.